The most dangerous traps do not come with shouts or threats, but disguised as innocent questions. Don't you really trust me? Why do you exaggerate so much? If you love me, why don't you do it for me? Words that seem like simple doubts, but in reality are hooks loaded with emotional poison. Each one seeks the same thing: to sow insecurity, make you feel guilty, and weaken your confidence until you surrender your power without realizing it. The manipulator does not need physical force. Their weapon is words, sharp as knives hidden behind a kind gesture. They know it. If they manage to make you doubt yourself, they no longer need to tie you up, because you will have tied yourself up. That is the real danger, allowing those phrases to become an echo in your mind, repeating until you believe they are right. Stoicism responds with the firmness of a wall. It reminds us that the mind is a citadel that no one can invade if we do not open the door. Serenity, clarity, and reason are the shield against these traps. It's not about arguing with the manipulator or trying to make them understand, but about remaining master of your inner self, confident in your judgment and your values. In this video, we will unmask those questions and show how to respond calmly and firmly. Because when you learn to recognize the poison, it no longer hurts you. And when you know how to shield your mind, no manipulation can control you. Stay, because what you will discover here are not simple answers. They are weapons of clarity that will make you unbreakable against any attempt at psychological control. 1. Do you really not trust me? A padlock may seem like an insignificant object until you understand that it guards the most valuable thing. The mind works the same way. If you don't secure the lock, anyone can come in and sow doubts. The manipulator knows this, and that's why they throw questions disguised as concern, like this one: do you really not trust me? They don't do it because they're interested in your trust, but because they're looking to open a crack in your security. That question may seem innocent, but in reality, it's a calculated blow, intended to make you justify yourself, to make you feel guilty, and to make you lower your voice beneath theirs. When someone throws that phrase at you, what they're really saying is, prove to me that I'm above your judgment. Here, the psychological game is clear. If you fall into the trap, you end up proving that you trust them even when your instincts warn you otherwise. And there lies the problem, because what you sacrifice is not just an opinion, but your own judgment. Marcus Aurelius said that the greatest wealth is in governing oneself, and that wealth is lost when you give your trust under pressure and not out of conviction. The Stoic key to neutralizing this poison is to remember that trust is not demanded, it is built with actions. When someone asks you if you really don't trust them, your answer doesn't need to be defensive or aggressive, but firm. Trust is demonstrated in deeds, not in words. Saying this not only disarms the manipulation, it also places you on a ground of clarity, where you don't give in to guilt or give more than what is due. A practical piece of advice is to learn to recognize the intention behind the question before answering. Take a pause and ask yourself, is this person looking to clarify, or are they trying to dominate? That pause is your shield, because it allows you to respond from reason and not from emotion. Another fundamental attitude is not to feel obliged to give extensive explanations. A manipulator feeds on your justifications, while a brief, clear, and serene response cuts the game off at the root. It's also vital to strengthen your personal judgment. The Stoic knows that their judgment is their greatest treasure, and that no one can impose doubts on them if they themselves do not accept them. Therefore, every time someone tries to make you feel guilty with this question, remember, trust is not begged, it is earned. If you have reasons to distrust, do not ignore them for fear of discomfort. That momentary discomfort is preferable to the silent betrayal that comes when you silence what you truly feel. Another piece of advice is to train calmness. Don't respond with anger, because that feeds the conflict. Respond with serenity, because that shows mastery. The manipulator expects you to give in or explode, but you disarm them when you maintain a calm and firm tone. That is the true victory, to show that your inner peace does not depend on external traps. The next time you hear, "Do you really not trust me?" remember the padlock of your mind. If you let anyone open it, you will lose the most valuable thing you have, your autonomy. But if you learn to keep it locked with reason, clarity, and calm, no one will be able to manipulate you. That is the Stoic way, to live with the certainty that your trust is not given out of obligation, but out of choice, and that your inner strength is not negotiated with any poisoned question. 2. If you love me, why don't you do it for me? True love should never become a noose around your neck. However, manipulators know how to disguise their control with phrases that seem sweet but hide a slow poison. The question, "If you love me, why don't you do it for me?" is one of those poisoned lassos. It doesn't seek to celebrate love, it seeks to use it as a bargaining chip, as if your affection had to be measured in imposed sacrifices. It's as if someone handed you a beautiful flower, but upon taking it, you discover it's full of hidden thorns that end up tearing your hand. The psychological game here is clear. The person intends for your love to become obedience, to renounce your judgment and your will to please them. But that's not a test of love, it's emotional manipulation designed to force you to give in. Love, understood from Stoic serenity, is not a prison or an obligation. It's a free bond, where two people walk together without losing their independence or their principles. When someone turns love into blackmail, they are transforming a noble feeling into a control mechanism. The Stoics teach us that we should not give up what is most sacred, our autonomy. Marcus Aurelius warned that human dignity is upheld by the ability to decide for oneself. If you give up your decisions to avoid a reproach disguised as love, you are surrendering your inner freedom. Love cannot be an excuse to break the will. Therefore, in the face of this poisonous question, the firm response is clear. Loving does not mean losing myself. It means sharing what I am without ceasing to be. A practical tip is not to respond immediately. Manipulators expect you to act under the pressure of the moment, to feel guilt so strong that you don't have time to think. Take a pause. That pause is power. Breathe and ask yourself, does this act they ask of me reflect love or dominance? If the latter weighs more, your answer should be a serene no, because giving in there does not strengthen the relationship, it poisons it. Another vital attitude is to learn to differentiate between genuine sacrifice and imposed sacrifice. In a healthy relationship, both can make efforts for the other, but always from conscious choice, not from obligation disguised as a test. The manipulator does not seek your choice, they seek your submission. And here's the difference. What is born of freedom strengthens the bond. What is born of guilt slowly destroys it. It's also important to remember that whoever loves you does not need to manipulate you. If someone uses love as an argument, they probably aren't pursuing your well-being, but your obedience. And that's where Stoic philosophy reminds us that no one can control our mind unless we allow it. Your love should not be a weapon against yourself. If the other person doesn't understand that, the problem is not with you, but with their intentions. A useful exercise is to train firm phrases that allow you to cut off emotional blackmail without falling into endless explanations. You can respond, "Love is not measured by what I give up. It's measured by the respect we have for each other." By using these words, you place the weight where it should be, on mutual respect, not on manipulation. The next time you hear, "If you love me, why don't you do it for me?" think of the flower with thorns. Not everything that seems tender is. Not everything that speaks of love comes from a pure feeling. If you learn to recognize the trap, you can uphold your dignity without feeling any guilt. 3. Don't you want to be a good person? An invisible judge can be more fearsome than any real enemy. That judge is the voice of guilt, that others try to sow in you. When someone throws the question at you, "Don't you want to be a good person?" they are not actually appealing to your virtue. They are trying to impose their definition of what it means to be good. It's as if they're handing you a manipulated mirror. When you look at it, you don't see your true reflection. You see the distorted image that the other wants you to assume. The manipulator knows that most people want to be seen as fair, noble, and correct. They take advantage of this aspiration to create a trap. With this question, they try to make you believe that if you do not meet their demands, then you are selfish, cold, or insensitive. They do not judge you for what you actually do, but for what they decide to interpret from your behavior. And there lies the poison, placing you in a position where it seems you only have two options: obey or bear the label of bad person. Stoicism teaches that true goodness does not depend on external opinion. Seneca reminded us that the path of virtue is to walk uprightly even if no one recognizes it. Being good is not about obeying everyone, it's about living according to reason, justice, and your principles. If you accept this manipulative question without questioning it, you let someone else define your morality and their convenience disguise as virtue. The way to neutralize this trap is to remember that virtue is not demonstrated by pleasing others' whims, but by acting coherently. In the face of this kind of pressure, a firm response can be, being a good person does not mean obeying, it means acting with justice. By using this phrase, you do not fall into the provocation and reaffirm that your moral judgment is not for sale. A practical tip is to review your motivations before responding. Ask yourself, am I considering this action because it is truly fair or because I fear being judged? That difference marks your freedom. The manipulator wants you to confuse kindness with obedience, but Stoic clarity consists in separating both things. When you know your intention is straight, you no longer need the approval of the one trying to blackmail you. Another tip is to learn to tolerate the discomfort of not being seen as good by everyone. The desire to be approved can become a chain if you do not control it. The Stoics understood that reputation is fragile and often unfair, but the only thing that matters is what you know about yourself. If your conscience is at peace, no external label can harm you. A useful exercise is to train internal phrases that reinforce your moral autonomy. You can repeat to yourself, "My worth does not depend on being accepted, it depends on living uprightly." This helps you disarm the emotional poison before it settles in your mind. Also, avoid getting into long explanations to prove that you are good. The manipulator does not seek your truth, they seek your submission. The next time someone asks you, "Don't you want to be a good person?" remember the manipulated mirror. Do not accept reflections that are not yours. True kindness is not defined in the mouth of the other, it is demonstrated in your consistent actions. Being a good person is not always saying yes, it's knowing when a no is the fairest answer. That is the strength that Stoicism leaves us, to live with such a firm inner compass that no manipulation can divert it from its course. 4. Why do you exaggerate so much? A fire does not start with a big flame, but with a spark. And often, when you express something that bothers you or hurts you, the manipulator throws out that phrase, "Why do you exaggerate so much?" What they are looking for is not to extinguish the spark with water, but to smother it with contempt. They want you to doubt your perception, to think that what you saw, felt, or understood has no value. That phrase is like throwing dirt on a seed before it can grow. It tries to bury your voice before it gains strength. The psychological mechanism behind it is clear. By accusing you of exaggerating, the manipulator shifts the attention from the real problem to your reaction. It's no longer about what happened, but about how you supposedly magnified it. With this strategy, they manage to put you on the defensive, trying to justify that your pain or your anger are legitimate. And while you strive to explain yourself, they evade the responsibility of their actions. It's a subtle trick to transform your experience into a defect and their behavior into something invisible. Stoicism teaches that perception is the first filter of reality. Epictetus repeated that things do not affect us, but the way we interpret them. Therefore, when someone tries to invalidate your perception with the label of exaggerated, what they are really doing is attacking your ability to interpret the world. If you fall into the trap, you start to doubt your judgment and surrender the power of your mind. But the Stoic knows that their judgment is their strength. They do not allow another to define them as weak or dramatic just because they are uncomfortable with the truth. How to neutralize this trap? The first thing is to recognize the intention. The phrase, "Why do you exaggerate so much?" is rarely a call for balance. It is almost always a maneuver to invalidate. A practical tip is not to get into the game of justifying every detail. Respond calmly. "I don't exaggerate, I just express what I perceive," returns the weight of the conversation to the central point. It's a way to maintain clarity without losing calm. Another tip is to train your emotional security. If you know what you saw or felt, you don't need the other person to validate it. Serenity comes from accepting your perception as legitimate, even if not everyone shares it. The manipulator feeds on your insecurity. When they perceive that you do not doubt yourself, they lose ground. And there is reflected the Stoic power. Internal conviction is worth more than any external discreditation. It is also vital to learn to differentiate between observing and reacting. You can observe that someone minimizes your experience without reacting with anger or extensive defenses. This observation allows you to decide calmly, do I want to continue explaining to someone who does not seek to understand me, or do I prefer to stand firm in my vision? This ability to choose and not to react is the true freedom that the Stoics defended. A practical exercise is to respond with facts, not with emotions. If someone insists that you exaggerate, limit your response to a clear description of what happened. In this way, you avoid entering the subjective terrain that they want to dominate, and you maintain your credibility with serenity. It's not about convincing them, but about not letting their label distort your own certainty. The next time you hear, "Why do you exaggerate so much?" remember the spark of the fire. The fact that they try to smother it does not mean that it does not exist. You know what you saw, what you felt, and what you experienced. You don't need to amplify it, but neither let it be buried under empty words. The Stoic path is clear. Trust your judgment. Be the master of your perception, and do not let anyone extinguish your voice by calling it exaggeration. 5. After all I've done for you, is this how you repay me? The heaviest debts are not those counted in money, but those that someone tries to engrave in your conscience. That phrase, "After all I've done for you, is this how you repay me?" is like an eternal invoice that never ends up being settled. It doesn't matter how much you've given, how much you've done, or how much you've responded. The manipulator always finds a way to remind you that you're in debt. It's an invisible chain made of accumulated favors, selected memories, and purposely sown guilt. The psychological mechanism is simple and perverse. The person who utters that phrase seeks to place themselves in the role of absolute benefactor, as if every gesture of theirs was a sacrifice demanding obedience from you. With this strategy, they not only try to minimize your efforts, but also turn your freedom into a mortgaged land. Now, any decision you make can be questioned with that supposed debt. You no longer act from your will, but from the pressure of not wanting to seem ungrateful. Stoicism teaches that gratitude is a virtue, but it should never become a chain. Marcus Aurelius wrote that it is fair to recognize the good received, but we should never lose sight of the fact that our life belongs to our reason, not to the debt imposed by others. Genuine gratitude is born from freedom, while forced gratitude is just another form of emotional slavery. How to respond to this manipulation? The first advice is to distinguish between real gratitude and emotional blackmail. Being grateful does not mean submitting. You can acknowledge what someone did for you without allowing them to use that memory as a weapon to control you. A firm and serene response could be, "I value what you did, but my decisions are not defined by debts, they are defined by what is fair." In this way, you acknowledge the gesture but at the same time shield your freedom. Another piece of advice is to avoid falling into the trap of justifying yourself with long explanations. The manipulator feeds on your defenses because every word of yours reinforces the idea that you owe something. Clarity consists in responding briefly, without hostility, but with firmness. This shows that you do not ignore the past, but you also do not turn it into a prison that dictates your present. It is also important to work on the inner acceptance that you will never be able to please the person who uses this tactic. That person will always find a way to remind you what you supposedly owe them, because the goal is not recognition, but control. Knowing this frees you from the illusion that someday they will feel satisfied. The Stoic accepts reality as it is and acts accordingly without expecting others to change their nature. A practical exercise is to focus on reciprocity. Ask yourself, have I also given in this relationship? Have I contributed, supported, or accompanied? Most of the time you will find that you have, and that the manipulator simply omits your contributions because their interest is not balance, but to keep you in a debtor's position. Recognizing your own actions is a way to regain perspective and prevent their discourse from erasing your value. The next time someone tells you, "After all I've done for you, is this how you repay me?" Remember that your life is not an outstanding account. No one has the right to charge you freedom under the excuse of past favors. Gratitude is noble when it is free, but it becomes poison when used as a weapon. 6. Don't you trust your own judgment? There are mirrors that do not reflect your image, but the ones someone else wants you to see. When a manipulator throws the question, "Don't you trust your own judgment?" what they do is place you in front of one of those distorted mirrors. They are not looking for you to reaffirm what you think, but to doubt, to break in the midst of uncertainty. It's a cunning move. With a single phrase, they turn your confidence into suspicion and your judgment into a minefield where every step seems insecure. The mechanism behind this question is sophisticated. First, the manipulator makes you believe that your perception is weak or erroneous. Then, they offer their vision as the correct path, as if they had a clarity that you lack. By doing so, they make you stop listening to yourself and start following their directions, thinking that without them, you cannot decide. It's a way to hijack your confidence from within. Stoicism, however, teaches the opposite. Epictetus repeated that our mind is the only thing truly ours, and to give it up is to lose the most sacred freedom. Trusting your own judgment does not mean that you never make mistakes. It means that you recognize your ability to reason, learn, and correct. The mistake becomes a teacher, not a chain. Therefore, the poison of this question lies in making you believe that making a mistake is so serious that you must depend on another to decide. The Stoic does not fear to be wrong. He fears to give up himself. How to neutralize this manipulation? The first piece of advice is to remember that security does not come from perfection, but from consistency. You don't need to always be right to trust yourself. What you need is to be faithful to your process, to your ability to evaluate and act honestly. When someone throws this question at you, you can calmly respond, "Yes, I trust my judgment, even though I may be wrong. I prefer to learn from my decisions than to depend on yours." Another practical tip is to train reflection before deciding. The manipulator takes advantage of sudden doubts, of the moments when they pressure you to act quickly. Take a pause. That pause is your control ground. Ask yourself, Is this decision aligned with my values, or am I responding to the fear they want to impose on me? That simple question filters manipulation and gives you clarity. It is also useful to recognize that trusting oneself is not the same as closing oneself off to the world. You can listen to advice, you can consider opinions, but in the end, the decision must pass through your filter. The Stoic listens, but does not submit. He attends, but does not abdicate his judgment. That balance is what prevents falling into the trap of those who seek to confuse humility with dependence. A powerful exercise is to practice internal affirmations that reinforce your judgment. Phrases like, "I have the right to decide and to learn from my decisions," or "My mind is my strength, not my enemy." By repeating them, you train your confidence and reduce the impact of those poisoned doubts that others try to sow. The next time someone tells you, "Don't you trust your own judgment?" remember the distorted mirror. Do not accept a manipulated reflection as if it were your truth. Your judgment does not have to be perfect to be valuable. The important thing is that it belongs to you. The Stoic path does not consist of avoiding mistakes, but of owning your decisions and learning from them with dignity. Because nothing is more dangerous than letting someone else think for you, and nothing is more liberating than staying true to the voice of your reason, even if the world tries to silence it. 7. Are you going to make me out to be the villain of the story? In every story there are heroes and villains, but the manipulator tries to rewrite the script so that you bear the blame for what he himself provoked. When he says, "Are you going to make me out to be the villain of the story?" he's not acknowledging his mistakes. He's trying to get you to hide them to protect his image. It's as if someone threw trash in your house and then accused you of being cruel for showing the mess. He doesn't want to face the consequences of his actions. He wants you to be complicit in his whitewashed version of reality. The mechanism of this manipulation is role reversal. The real culprit positions himself as a preemptive victim, forcing you to feel that if you speak or point out what happened, you will be betraying him or damaging his reputation. The pressure is not on what you did, but on the fear of being seen as unfair or cruel if you expose him. With this strategy, the manipulator seeks to shield himself with your silence and keep the mask he shows to others intact. Stoicism teaches that justice does not depend on appearances, but on truth. Seneca warned that honesty stands even when it is uncomfortable. If someone fears to be seen as a villain, the solution is not for you to keep quiet, but for him to act with integrity. The responsibility for the image always falls on the actions, not on the one who points them out. Therefore, when you face this question, you must remember that your duty is not to protect other people's masks, but to keep your conscience clean. How to respond? A clear attitude is not to accept the role of accomplice. You can calmly say, "I don't make villains. Each one writes their role with their actions." This response disarms the manipulation because it returns the weight to the origin of the problem, his behavior, not your voice. Firmness is not in attacking, but in refusing to carry blames that do not belong to you. Another practical advice is to lose the fear of other people's interpretations. Part of the strength of this manipulation is in making you fear external judgment. The Stoic understands that he does not control what others think, only what he does. If someone accuses you of making him a villain by showing the truth, remember that it is not your duty to control how others perceive him, but to be true to your reason and your justice. It is also vital to recognize that protecting the manipulator only strengthens the cycle. If you keep quiet for fear of his image, you allow him to repeat the pattern over and over again. Justice is defended with clarity, not with forced silences. By standing firm, you send a clear message. Truth is not negotiated for appearances. A useful exercise is to keep a mental or written record of what happened. This helps you not to fall into the confusion that the manipulator wants to create. When you doubt your memories, he gains ground. But if you maintain clarity about what happened, the manipulation loses strength. Reason is your best shield against the distortion of the story. The next time you hear, "Are you going to make me out to be the villain of the story?" remember that you are not the writer of his role. Each person builds their image with what they do and what they say. If his actions show him as a villain, it's not because you expose him, it's because he chose that path. The Stoic path teaches you to hold the truth without fear, to defend your conscience above any mask, and to remember that true justice does not protect appearances, it protects integrity. 8. Are you the only one who disagrees? Group pressure can feel like a river current that sweeps everything in its path. Whoever dares to swim against it seems strange, even rebellious. The manipulator knows this, and that's why they ask the question, "Are you the only one who disagrees?" With these words, they are not seeking to dialogue. They aim to isolate you, to make you feel that your voice is insignificant in front of the majority. It's like being in a room full of echoes, repeating the same thing. And when you speak in a different tone, they try to make you believe that you are the problem for not fitting in. The psychological game here is the manipulation of belonging. Humans fear being left out, fear being singled out as different. With this question, the manipulator appeals to that fear. If everyone thinks one way, how dare you think differently? The goal is for you to give up your judgment for the comfort of not being alone. And in that resignation is where the most valuable thing is lost: the autonomy of the mind. Stoicism teaches that truth is not measured in votes. Marcus Aurelius reminded us that what is right can be in the hands of one person against a mistaken crowd. The Stoic does not fear being in the minority because they know that what is essential is coherence with reason and virtue. What defines your strength is not how many support you, but your ability to stand firm even when everyone tries to push you in the opposite direction. How to respond to this trap? One initial attitude is not to justify yourself seeking approval. When you say, "Yes, I am the only one and therefore I am wrong," you surrender your judgment to the number. Instead, a calm response could be, "I prefer to be alone in what I consider right than accompanied in what I consider unjust." This phrase breaks the spell of the group and reaffirms that your judgment does not depend on statistics. A practical piece of advice is to train the discomfort of being different. Not everyone will understand your stance, and that's okay. The manipulator seeks for the fear of loneliness to bend you, but if you learn to tolerate that discomfort, you discover that it does not destroy you. On the contrary, it strengthens you. The Stoic turns discomfort into a character exercise because they know that the easy path rarely leads to what is right. Another piece of advice is to focus on the facts, not on the majorities. Ask yourself, does my disagreement stem from reason or whim? If it stems from reason, it doesn't matter if you are 1 in 100, your position is still valid. Inner clarity protects you from external noise. A useful exercise is to practice internal phrases that reinforce you. The truth does not change because it is rejected by many. By remembering this, you reduce the impact of that psychological pressure and return authority to your judgment. The next time someone tells you, "Are you the only one who disagrees?" think about the river current. Yes, it can sweep many away, but whoever dares to swim against it shows more strength than those who let themselves be carried away without resistance. The Stoic path reminds you that solitude in truth is more dignified than the crowd in a lie, and that your duty is not to fit in, but to stand firm in what your reason dictates as just. Thank you for staying until the end of the video. If you watched the whole thing, comment "I am Stoic" as our secret signal to know that you're a true student of Stoicism. Don't forget to subscribe and give the video a like if you enjoyed it. See you in the next video, and remember, keep cultivating your Stoic mind.